The grand hall of the Atrium had never held a silence like this one. Under the vast glass dome, where a chandelier the size of a small car threw 1,000 points of light across the marble, 300 people stood without moving, and not one of them seemed to be breathing. On a raised platform at the center of the hall, beneath a banner that read the Atrium Master's Prize, 2 velvet-draped pillars hid 2 finished pieces no one had yet been allowed to see. Between them, at a microphone, in a suit that cost more than most of the room earned in a year, stood Rashid Al-Mazroui, gripping the edge of the lectern with both hands. His knuckles had gone white. His voice, when it finally came, cracked straight down the middle. "You can't judge me like some tradesman," he said. "Do you know who my family is? My family owns this mall. You all exist to serve me." A few steps away stood a young woman in the plain gray uniform of a shop assistant, the same clerk half the mall had spent 2 years walking past without seeing. There was fine gold dust on her hands and a jeweler's loop pushed up into her hair. She was not shouting. She was not even angry. She simply looked at the old man seated at the center of the judge's table, a man with a white beard and a goldsmith's scarred, careful hands, and waited. Because a long time ago, in a tiny workshop a very long way from Dubai, her father had taught her the only rule that had ever mattered. You do not argue with a liar. You let the work talk. On the giant screens flanking the platform, a live stream counter climbed past 200,000 viewers. A modest elderly woman in a simple black abaya sat in the front row with her hands folded over an old handbag, watching the young clerk the way you watch someone you have decided to pray for. And at the judge's table, the old goldsmith reached for the 2 sealed envelopes that held the blind scores. The scores given by 7 master craftsmen from 6 countries who would judge the 2 pieces without ever being told a single name. To understand how a shop clerk with no name, no wealth, and no family behind her brought the untouchable son of a Dubai billionaire to his knees in front of the whole world, without ever raising her voice, without a single secret weapon, using nothing but her own 2 hands, we have to go back to a quiet Tuesday morning, a glittering mall just opening for the day, and a worn little ring that a grieving old woman carried in the bottom of her handbag. The Atrium opened at 10, but Leah Mercado had been at her bench since 8, and she loved it that way. In the hour before the doors opened, the great mall was almost holy. The fountains not yet running, the marble floors mirror bright, the light coming down through the glass dome soft and gray and gold. Leah sat in the little glass-walled workshop at the back of Maison Lumen, the most exclusive jewelry house on the Atrium's ground floor, with a loop screwed into her eye and a broken clasp under her fingers. And for that 1 hour a day, she was completely happy. She was 26, small and unhurried, with careful hands and the kind of quiet, watchful eyes that most people mistook for shyness. She was, by every official title the mall recognized, a shop assistant, a salesgirl in a gray uniform, one of 10,000 foreign workers who kept the palace running, and were, to most of the customers, roughly as visible as the air conditioning.
What none of those customers knew was that the hands in the gray uniform were the best in the building. Leah had grown up in a small town in the Philippines, in a workshop that smelled of solder and polishing rouge, the daughter of a village silversmith named Ramon Mercado. Her father had never owned anything grand. He repaired the wedding rings and baptism medals of people who paid him in installments, and sometimes in mangoes, and he taught his daughter everything he knew at a bench barely big enough for 2. He taught her to set a stone so it caught the light from every angle. He taught her to hand-engrave a name so fine you needed a loop to read it. And he taught her the one thing she had carried across an ocean and never let go of. Anyone can plate cheap brass to look like gold, Anak, he used to say, turning a customer's ring in the lamplight. It shines just the same in the shop window.
put it to the flame always tells the truth. Cheap metal can't hide from fire, and people are exactly the same. Don't listen to how a man shines. Wait for the flame. When Ramon died, he left her almost nothing. A box of worn tools and a single small steel punch he had made himself, stamped with a tiny 8-rayed sun, the maker's mark he had used on every piece he ever finished. Leah had come to Dubai to send money home to her mother and her 2 younger brothers, and she had taken the only job she could get, selling watches and necklaces to people who never once asked her name. But at night, and in that quiet hour before opening, she used her father's tools. And slowly, without anyone important noticing, she had become something the mall's glossy directory had no category for: a master. That Tuesday morning, 10 minutes after the doors opened, the master was on her knees picking up someone else's mess. Because that was the same morning Rashid al-Masrouri arrived, and Rashid never arrived quietly.
He came through the north entrance, the way weather comes. A matte black sports car left running at the valet stand, a phone in one hand, 2 hangers-on trailing behind him, and a voice pitched to make sure the whole ground floor knew he had entered it. Rashid was 24. His father was Omar al-Masrouri, chairman of Masrouri Holdings, the property empire that had built the Atrium and half the skyline around it. And Rashid wore that fact like a crown he'd been born wearing and had never once had to earn. He fancied himself, that season, a designer. He had recently announced to his followers that he was entering the world of haute joaillerie, and he had come to be admired. What he found instead, just inside the doors of Maison Lumen, was an old woman he decided on sight was beneath the building. Her name was Halima, though Leah would not learn that for a few minutes yet. She was perhaps 70, an Emirati widow in a plain, slightly faded black abaya, clutching a handbag that had been good 20 years ago. She had come in through the grand north doors, looking lost and a little frightened by all the mirrored gold, and she was standing at the edge of the Maison Lumen salon, gathering her courage, when Rashid swept past and stopped as though he'd smelled something bad. "Excuse me," he said, not to her but to the room. "How did this get in here?" He looked the old woman up and down, at the worn bag, the simple sandals, the abaya with the mended hem. "This is a luxury house, Auntie, not a bus station. The charity souk is on the lower level. Go, go." He flicked his fingers at her as though shooing a pigeon. One of his friends laughed. "Seriously," Rashid added, delighted with himself now. "Who let her in?" "You there," he snapped toward the sales floor without looking. "Get her out before she touches something she could never pay for." The old woman's face crumpled, with the particular shame of a proud person humiliated in public. She turned to go.
Leah stood up from behind the far counter. "She's my customer," Leah said. Her voice was quiet, even, and it carried further than a shout would have. She crossed the salon, and instead of ushering the old woman out, she pulled a velvet stool up to the counter and gestured to it gently. "Please, Auntie, sit. You've come a long way this morning, I think. Let me get you some water." Rashid stared. "Are you deaf? I said get her out." Leah looked at him for one long, level second, long enough that a flicker of something uncertain crossed the rich young man's face, and then she turned her back on him entirely and knelt to the old woman's eye level. "Ignore that," she said softly, in the tone you'd use to a startled child. "You are welcome here. What can I help you with?" It was the turning away that made Rashid hate her. He had built his entire self out of being the most important object in any room, and the counter girl had just treated him like a draft from an open door. The old woman sat, trembling a little, and after a moment she opened the clasp of the old handbag and took out a small twist of tissue paper. Inside was a man's wedding ring, plain gold, worn thin on one side from 40 years of a working hand, the band cracked nearly through. "My husband," she said, and her voice wobbled. "Abdullah. He passed in the spring."
She pressed her lips together until she could go on. "They tell me it is worth nothing, this ring. Too thin now to fix, they say. The gold too old. Everywhere I take it, they show me new ones, so shiny, and they look at me like..." She glanced toward Rashid, who was loudly telling his friends about a yacht. "Like that. But I don't want a new one. I want his. I wore mine 41 years. I only want to be able to wear his on a chain, over my heart, without it breaking to pieces. Is it truly worth nothing?"
Leah took the cracked ring and cradled it in her palm as carefully as if it had been the crown jewel of the whole gleaming house. She turned it under the counterlight, and she saw what the others had seen. Old gold, worn dangerously thin, a hairline fracture running most of the way around. And she saw what the others had not bothered to see. 41 years of a marriage, worn into soft metal. "Auntie," she said gently, "whoever told you this is worth nothing was looking at the gold. They should have been looking at the ring." She smiled. "The gold I can strengthen. I can fuse new gold of the same purity into the worn side. Rebuild the band from the inside so it keeps its shape and its marks, and you would never see the join. It is delicate work. It takes a few days and a steady hand, but it can absolutely be done. And when I'm finished, you will be able to wear Abdullah's ring for another 40 years. The old woman's eyes filled. "And the cost? I don't have..." "Leave the cost to me," she said, which was against every rule in the shop, and which she said anyway. "Some work you do for the house. Some work you do because it's the reason you learned the trade at all." Behind them, Rashid had drifted close enough to hear, and he snorted. "Unbelievable. You're going to waste the workshop on a beggar's scrap of tin? You know what that is?" he said to his friends, jerking his chin at the ring. "That's a 200 dirham ring. My watch cost more than her whole family." He leaned toward Leah with a nasty smile. "When my father hears his staff are running a soup kitchen out of a luxury salon, you'll be on the next flight back to wherever you swam from. Remember who owns the floor you're standing on." Leah didn't rise to it. She simply wrote out a repair ticket, pressed it into the old woman's hands, folded the woman's fingers around it, and said, "Come back Friday, Auntie. Ask for Leah. It will be beautiful, I promise you."
When Halima had gone, walking a little taller than she'd come in, Rashid was still there, and he was no longer smiling. Being ignored had curdled in him. He leaned both hands on the glass counter, right over the tray of white diamonds, and lowered his voice so only she could hear it. "I don't know who you think you are," he said, "but I'm going to enjoy watching you learn. This is my family's mall. Every tile, every light, every little gray uniform in it, ours. You just made your time here very, very short." "I'm starting to understand who you are," Leah said mildly, and slid a soft cloth over the diamonds to buff away his handprints. "Was there something you wanted to buy?" There wasn't. There never was. Rashid Al-Mazroui had never in his life come to a shop to buy something. He came to be worshipped. And he left the Maison Lumen salon that morning with the one thing he could not tolerate lodged under his skin like a splinter: the memory of a shop girl who was not afraid of him. What Rashid did not know, what no one in the building knew, was that in 11 days, in the great glass hall 2 floors above them, the quiet counter girl he just threatened was going to stand at a bench beside him as an equal in front of the whole world and let the work talk. If you want to understand how much power a spoiled young man can have when no one in his whole life has ever told him no, you only had to watch Rashid Al-Mazroui cross the floor of the Atrium. Managers materialized. Valets ran. A barista at the cafe on the concourse had learned to start his order the instant the black car pulled up, because the one time she'd been slow, he'd had her written up. Shop directors who should have known better laughed a half-second too long at his jokes, because his father's company was their landlord, and a word from a Mazroui could end a 10-year lease. Rashid had spent his whole life inside that echo, and the echo had convinced him that the sound of his own voice was the same thing as being right. And that season, the Atrium was building toward the one event that could turn all that noise into something that looked from a distance like substance: the Atrium Masters Prize. It was the most prestigious craft competition in the region, and it had a reputation for one specific precious thing: it could not be bought. It was run not by the mall, but by an independent international guild of goldsmiths, and its chief judge was a man whose name made even Onur al-Mazrui sit up a little straighter: Master Salim al-Amiri, a 78-year-old Emirati goldsmith who had trained in the old souks and then in Florence and Jaipur, who had turned down a royal appointment because it came with strings, and who was known across 3 continents as utterly, gloriously impossible to influence. "Gold is honest," Salim liked to say, "so my judging will be too." The prize worked in 2 rounds, and the guild guarded its fairness like a religion. In the first round, every entrant, famous house or unknown apprentice, submitted a finished piece anonymously, marked only with a number. 7 master judges from 6 countries scored those pieces blind, never told a single name, and the top scores became the finalists. Then, in the second round, those finalists did the one thing that no money and no ghost and no famous surname could fake. They sat at benches in the grand hall of the Atrium, in front of the judges, a live audience, and a global live stream. And they built. Live, under time, hands only. Whatever came out of your hands in that hall was the only thing that counted. Leah had entered. Of course she had entered. She had spent 3 months of her quiet hours making her first round piece, a brooch in the shape of a sampaguita, the little white flower of home. 41 hand-set stones, a hidden hinge, her father's tiny 8-rayed son stamped where only a loop would ever find it. And she had submitted it under nothing but a number, told no one, and gone back to selling watches. Rashid had entered too. Rashid had entered because a Mazrui winning the Atrium Masters Prize in the Mazrui Mall would be the perfect ornament for the designer brand he was building online. There was only the small inconvenience that Rashid could not actually make anything. So his first round masterpiece had been quietly built by a talented, badly paid workshop craftsman named Emil, who had been given a fat envelope and a clear warning about what happened to workers who embarrassed the family. It was a genuinely good piece. Emil was good. It passed the blind judging honestly on Emil's skill, and Rashid al-Mazrui became a finalist for a competition he could not have entered on his own for 1,000 years. He was insufferable about it.
And for the 11 days between the finalist announcement and the live final, he made Leah his personal project, because somewhere in those days, he found out something that turned his idle cruelty into a campaign. It started small, the way cruelty always does. He took to swinging through the Maison Lumen salon once a day just to make her fetch things, to click his fingers at the counter girl, to send back 3 trays of watches and buy nothing, purely to watch her carry them. He complained to her manager, a tired, decent Lebanese man named Nabil, that she was unfriendly, and stood there smirking while Nabil, sweating, apologized to the landlord's son. When Leah stayed late in the glass workshop, Rashid would rap on the glass with a coin and mouth tick, 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 as if her time belonged to him too. But the thing that truly enraged him when he learned it was this: the counter girl was a finalist. He found out by accident from Emil, who let it slip that one of the other finalist pieces, a little white flower brooch that had scored frighteningly high with the judges, had been made, everyone in the back workshops whispered, by the Filipina girl from Lumen who does the wheel repairs. Rashid laughed out loud when he heard it. Then he stopped laughing because he understood, dimly, what it meant. In the first round, behind the numbers, where his name meant nothing and his father's leases meant nothing, a shop girl had beaten almost everyone.
And in the second round, at the live bench, where Emil could not sit in for him, she was going to do it again, in front of the entire world, standing 3 feet away from him. He could not allow that. Not the losing. Rashid had never even imagined losing. What he could not allow was the comparison. So he escalated.
He went first to the guild and tried to buy it the only way he knew how, through his father. Omar al-Mazroui's office sent Master Salim a gracious note suggesting that, as the prize was hosted in a Mazroui property, it would be appropriate for the family to have input into the final judging panel. Salim al-Amiri read the note, folded it in half, and sent back a single line. The prize is judged blind, or it is not judged at all. If the family prefers, we will happily move the final to the museum across the city. The Mazroui office did not write again. You cannot lean on a man who is genuinely willing to walk away, and Salim had been genuinely willing to walk away from grander men than Omar for 50 years. That failure only made Rashid meaner. If he could not corrupt the judging, he would remove the competitor. He tried the manager first. He cornered Nabil and told him pleasantly that the family would be reviewing Maison Lumen's lease renewal that quarter, and that it would be a shame if a single unprofessional employee cost the whole house its flagship location. The implication was not subtle. Get rid of the girl, or the mall gets rid of you. Nabil, who had a family of his own and 11 other people's salaries riding on that lease, went gray. He liked Leah. He knew exactly what she was, and he also knew what the Mazrouis could do. That night he sat in his office with the lease documents in front of him and hated himself, and did nothing, which he would later be ashamed of, and, later still, be given a chance to redeem. Then Rashid found the pressure point that actually moved: the workshop. He learned that Leah, technically a sales assistant, had been using the Maison Lumen bench and tools after hours to make her competition piece, something managers quietly allowed for their best people all over the mall. So Rashid reported it, wide-eyed and wounded, to mall administration as misuse of tenant facilities, and had a memo issued forbidding non-workshop staff from the benches after closing. It was aimed at exactly one person. Overnight, Leah lost her tools, her bench, and the only place she had to practice before the most important day of her life. She found a way. Of course she found a way. She was Ramon Mercado's daughter. She bought a cheap propane torch and a scrap of steel plate, and she practiced on the floor of the room she shared with 3 other women in a workers' housing block 40 minutes from the mall, by the light of her phone, until 2 in the morning, her hands remembering what the memo could not take away from them. But Rashid's cruelty, once rewarded, did what cruelty always does. It spread to whoever was weakest in the room. And the weakest person in the room, it turned out, was a grieving old woman with a worn ring, who made the mistake of coming back on Friday, exactly as she'd been told, to collect it.
Because when Halima returned that Friday, Leah had the ring ready, and it was, quietly, a small miracle. The cracked, worn band had been rebuilt from the inside so seamlessly that you could not find the repair with a loop. The old hallmarks were untouched. The soft, thin gold of 41 years still looked exactly like itself, only whole again. Leah had strung it on a fine chain, as promised. When Halima saw it, she pressed it to her lips and then to her chest and wept right there at the counter, and grabbed Leah's careful hands in both of hers and said, "You gave him back to me. God is generous, my daughter." It seemed at the time like the sweet, powerless blessing of a poor old woman. It was not. It was a promise the universe would keep in a way none of them could yet imagine, not through wealth or rescue, but through a witness who happened to be in exactly the right place twice. Rashid saw the old woman crying at the counter and the shop girl holding her hands, and something in his small, starved soul decided that this tenderness he could not feel and could not buy was the thing he most wanted to destroy. He had 11 days until the final. He would not wait that long to break her. He would do it now, in the cruelest way he could invent. And in reaching for that cruelty,
he was about to hand her and Master Salim and a live stream of 200,000 strangers the rope he would eventually hang himself with. It happened 3 days before the final, in the middle of the Maison Lumen salon, in front of a dozen customers and 4 security cameras. Halima had come back once more, not to buy, she could never buy, but because a lonely widow had found the one place in the enormous cold mall where someone was kind to her, and she had brought Leah a small box of homemade date sweets to say thank you. She was sitting shyly on the velvet stool, the rebuilt ring on its chain around her neck, when Rashid walked in with his 2 friends and his plan.
He went straight to the main display case, the one holding the house's signature piece, a diamond solitaire the size of a chickpea, worth more than Leah would earn in 20 years. He asked to see it. Nabil himself, nervous, unlocked the case and set the ring on a black velvet pad on the counter. Rashid picked it up, admired it, turned it in the light, and in a movement so smooth that only the cameras truly caught it, palmed it into his own jacket pocket and set an empty ring box back on the pad. Then he stepped back, patted his pockets theatrically, and shouted, "It's gone! The diamond, it's gone!" He spun, wild-eyed, pointing not at himself, but across the salon at the old woman on the stool. "She took it! I saw her! She was right here! She had her bag open! Search her! Search the beggar! I told you people she shouldn't be in here!" The salon froze. Halima's face went white with terror and confusion. No, I would never touch. Empty the bag," Rashid roared, loving it now. The whole room his stage. "Call security. Call the police. This is exactly what happens when you let these people into a house like this. They rob you blind." Security came. 2 mall guards, and behind them the shift supervisor. And Halima, 70 years old, a widow who had never in her life taken a thing that wasn't hers, sat frozen while a stranger tipped her old handbag out onto the counter in front of everyone. A coin purse, a folded prayer, a photograph of Abdullah, and a small box of date sweets she'd made for the girl who'd been kind to her. No diamond, of course, but the absence of the diamond did not stop the shame from falling on her like a collapsing wall. Customers were staring. Someone was filming. Rashid stood over her, arms crossed, radiant with cruelty. "Check the sweets box. Check her sleeves. People like her are clever." And Leah stepped between the old woman and the guards. "She doesn't have it," Leah said, and again her quiet voice cut through the noise. "She was sitting 3 meters from that case the entire time." She turned and looked directly at Rashid, and for the first time, there was something hard under the calm. "But I watched you hold it." The salon gasped. It was, in that world, an unthinkable thing to say. A shop girl, a foreign salesgirl in a gray uniform, accusing the landlord's son of theft in front of a crowd? Rashid's face went purple. "How dare you?" he breathed. Then to the supervisor, cold and precise now, playing the only card that never failed him. "This one put her up to it. The 2 of them planned it. I want them both out, now. And I want this one," he jabbed a finger at Leah, "gone. Not suspended, gone. My family owns this building and I will not have thieves working in it. If she is still employed in this mall tomorrow morning, I will personally see that Maison Lumen's lease is not renewed. Ask your manager if I'm joking." Nabil did not say she was innocent. That was the moment that would haunt him. He stood there, gray and silent, the lease in his mind's eye. And he let it happen. The guards, apologetic but obedient, their own jobs hanging on the same golden thread as everyone else's, escorted a weeping old widow and a silent young woman out through the grand north doors of the Atrium, and left them on the pavement in the white afternoon heat, like 2 bags of rubbish set out for collection. By that evening, it was official. Leah Mercado had been terminated for cause: theft. The worst 2 words you can hang on a foreign worker whose entire life in the country depends on her visa, which depends on her job.
No mall in Dubai would hire a salesgirl fired for stealing. Her work permit would lapse. Within weeks, she would be on a plane home, not with the savings she promised her mother, but with a ruined name.
And the detail that made it monstrous rather than merely cruel, the same termination stripped her, on paper, of her standing as a Maison Lumen finalist. The house had sponsored her entry. The house had now fired her for theft. And Mazrui-friendly voices in mall administration were already murmuring that a disgraced thief obviously could not be allowed to compete in 3 days' time on the family's own stage. The accusation had been engineered to do two things at once: destroy the old woman for sport and remove the one competitor Rashid could not beat with his hands. That detail was not small either, because of what it meant for the people at home. Leah's younger brother had 1 year of nursing school left. Her mother's tiny house had a new roof only because of the money Leah sent every month. All of it ran through a job that a rich boy had just erased with a lie and a sleight of hand. Leah sat with Halima on a bench at a bus stop outside the gleaming mall, the two of them thrown out of the palace together, and the old woman wept and apologized over and over. "It's my fault, if I had never come in." "No," Leah said softly, and took the old woman's hand, the one with the rebuilt ring on its chain now clutched inside it. "Auntie, listen to me. You did nothing. He did this. And men like that," she heard her father's voice and her throat tightened, "men like that shine very brightly in the shop window. But there is a fire coming in 3 days that he doesn't understand. My father used to say the flame always tells the truth. Cheap metal can't hide from it." She wiped her eyes and set her jaw. "I just have to make sure I'm standing at that bench when the fire comes." The trouble was, she'd just been banned from the building.
That night, for the first time since she'd come to Dubai, Leah did something other than endure. She got angry, and then she got organized. She was not going to shout. She was going to do what her father did with a doubtful piece of gold. She was going to put the truth to the flame in front of everyone and let it speak for itself. She just needed help getting back inside. And it turned out, though she didn't know it yet that night, that she was not nearly as alone as Rashid believed. What Rashid al-Mazrui had forgotten, because he had never once needed to think about it, was that a palace like the Atrium is not held up by the people whose names are on it. It is held up by 10,000 people in gray and navy uniforms who see everything, remember everything, and are almost never asked. He had spent years being cruel to exactly those people, and cruelty, it turns out, keeps a very long ledger. The first page of that ledger was a security guard named Deepak Kumar. Deepak had worked the ground floor cameras of the Atrium for 9 years. He had a wife and a daughter in Kerala whose photographs were taped inside his locker, and he had watched, on his monitors, 1,000 small kindnesses and cruelties that the rich people on the marble never knew were seen. He had watched Leah Mercado, over 2 years, give up her lunch breaks to fix a colleague's broken necklace clasp for free, talk a panicking bride down from tears, and once chase a customer half a mile through the mall to return a dropped wallet. And on the afternoon of the theft, Deepak had been sitting in front of the camera feed for the Maison Lumen salon, and he had seen, in crisp, time-stamped, 4-camera high definition, exactly what Rashid's hands had done.
When his supervisor told him, an hour later, to lose the relevant 30 minutes of footage as a favor to the family, Deepak said yes with his mouth, went back to the control room, and quietly copied all 4 camera angles onto a memory card, which he took home and did not lose at all. He was a cautious man with a family to protect. He knew what happened to little people who crossed the Mazruis, but he also knew what he had seen, and his father, like Leah's, had raised him to know the difference between careful and complicit. The second page of the ledger was Emil, the ghost. Emil, the underpaid workshop craftsman who had secretly built Rashid's first-round piece, had spent 11 days feeling sicker and sicker about it. He had watched the girl who actually deserved to be in the final get thrown out on a lie, and he had realized that if Rashid somehow won, it would be Emil's own hands that had helped a bully steal a prize from a better artisan. On the day after the accusation,
Emil went looking for Leah at the workers' housing block, and he found her on the floor of her room with a propane torch and a piece of scrap steel, practicing, and he sat down and told her everything. Who had really made Rashid's first-round entry, how much he'd been paid to keep quiet, and that he would say so out loud if she could ever get anyone with authority to listen. The only one who could make it matter is Master Salim, Emil said. He is the only man in this whole city those people can't touch. So Leo went to find the one man in Dubai who could not be bought.
Getting to Salim Al-Amiri was not easy for a fired shopgirl with no appointment, but Leah had one thing going for her that opened the old master's door where money never could have. He had judged her brooch, blind, by number, weeks earlier, and he had privately told the guild it was the finest amateur setting he had seen in a decade, and had demanded to know whose hands had made it. They met in his workshop across the city, a plain room that smelled wonderfully of solder and rouge, the smell of Leah's whole childhood, and for a moment, seeing the old man's scarred, careful hands, she nearly cried. She told him everything. He listened the way a good craftsman listens, without interrupting, turning each fact over to check it for flaws. Then he was silent for a long time. "Child," he said at last, "I have spent 50 years protecting one small, stubborn idea, that in my hall, on my bench, a human being is worth exactly what their hands can do, and not one dirham more or less. Not their name, not their father, not their passport." His eyes were bright and hard. "They fired you to keep you off that bench because they are afraid of what your hands will say next to his. Do you understand what that means? It means they already know the answer. So here is what we are going to do. We are not going to make a scene. We are not going to beg the mall for anything. Your finalist place was earned blind, by number, under guild rules, and the guild, not the Mazruis, decides who competes. You are still a finalist. I will send a formal instrument tonight confirming it, over my own seal, and if the Atrium tries to bar a lawful finalist from a guild event, I will move the entire prize across the city and tell the world's press exactly why. Let us see how the family enjoys that headline." Leah's eyes filled. "They'll say I'm a thief, on the stage, in front of everyone. They'll use it to—"
"Yes," Salim said, "they will." And for the first time, the old master smiled. "Bring the truth with you. Bring every honest witness you have." He nodded toward her scarred, capable hands. "Be undeniably, unbuyably good, out loud, in the light, where everyone can see it. Let the work talk." What followed over the next 2 days was the quiet assembling of a truth too heavy to lift. Deepak brought his memory card, 4 angles, time-stamped, of Rashid palming the diamond and setting down the empty box, and terrified but steady, agreed to let it be shown, because Master Salim's name on a guarantee of protection meant more to a 9-year guard than a supervisor's threat. Emil signed a plain, honest statement about the first-round piece, and Nabil, poor gray Nabil, came to find Leah at last, unable to sleep, and said the thing he should have said in the salon. "I was a coward. I knew you didn't do it. I knew he did it. I chose the lease over the truth, and I have felt sick every hour since." He squared his tired shoulders. "Whatever you're planning, I'll stand up and say what I saw. On the record. Let them tear up the lease. Some things cost too much." But the family, of course, was not asleep either, because Omar al-Mazrui had not built an empire by losing gracefully, and the moment his people understood that a fired shopgirl was somehow still going to appear at the family's own prize, and that some memory card was floating around the workers' housing blocks, they went hunting. Mall administration abruptly could not confirm Leah's entry paperwork. Deepak was suspended on a pretext and told to hand in his access card. A manager visited the housing block, asking with a smile and an envelope whether anyone had any old footage that should be returned to its owner. For 2 days, it seemed the truth might be strangled before it ever reached the light, that money would simply outspend honesty, the way it usually did. The emotional low came the night before the final. Deepak, suspended, sat at home with the memory card in his hand and his daughter's photo on the wall, and thought about everything a man with no power stands to lose by telling the truth about a man with all of it. And Leah sat on the floor of her room with her father's little sun-stamped punch closed in her fist, and for one long hour she believed she had lost, that they would bar her at the door, bury the footage, and put her on a plane, and that the bright shop window shine of the Mazrui name would win the way it always won. She called her mother in the Philippines and didn't tell her any of it, just listened to her voice, and then she washed her face and looked at the punch, the 8-rayed son her dead father had cut by hand, and she heard him again. Don't listen to how a man shines. Wait for the flame. She stood up. She was going to that bench if she had to walk through every guard in the building. Then, at nearly midnight, her phone rang. It was Master Salim. "It's arranged," the old man said, and there was iron under the calm. "I informed the guild board and quietly 2 members of the international press who loved this prize that there was an attempt to bar a lawful finalist and to suppress evidence of a crime committed on the competition premises. Funny thing about families who care only for their name. The one threat they understand is the truth arriving in public. The Atrium's management has discovered all at once a deep commitment to fairness." A dry pause. "You will compete tomorrow, child. Your bench is ready. Mr. Kumar's suspension has been lifted, and he and his memory card are personally my guests in the front row. Sleep. Tomorrow you go to that hall as exactly what you are." A warmer pause. "And what you are, I think, is the best pair of hands in that building. Let us go and prove it out loud." Leah hung up, and then she did one more thing. She took out the Sampagita brooch, her first-round piece, returned to her that afternoon by the guild, and with her father's punch, she pressed his tiny 8-rayed son into the back of it, beside her own, the 2 marks together. It was not evidence. It would prove nothing to any judge. It was simply a daughter telling a dead silversmith in a village across the ocean, "I'm about to put it to the flame, Papa. Watch." The morning of the final, the grand hall of the Atrium gleamed like the inside of a jewel. Under the vast glass dome, 300 chairs had been set in tidy rows around a raised platform. On the platform stood 3 working benches, each with a torch, a set of tools, and a small safe of identical materials, gold of the same purity, stones of the same cut, so that nothing separated the finalists but their hands. A long table faced the benches, the 7 master judges from 6 countries, with Salim Al-Amiri at the center. Giant screens flanked the stage for the global live stream, and in the front row, at Master Salim's personal invitation, sat 2 people the Mazruis had tried very hard to erase: a security guard named Deepak Kumar, holding a small memory card, and a modest elderly widow in a black abaya, with a rebuilt gold ring on a chain over her heart. The finalists were 3. A celebrated designer from Istanbul, Rashid Al-Mazrui, in a suit worth more than the prize, who had spent the morning being photographed, and Leah Mercado, in a borrowed clean shirt, who had spent the morning praying and checking the spring of a pair of tweezers. The task, announced only as the clock started, was the thing no ghost and no fortune could fake. Each finalist had 4 hours to design and hand-build a single finished brooch, live, from the identical materials in the safe, judged blind by number. The judges would score 3 finished pieces marked only 1, 2, and 3, without being told whose hands had made which.
And here, at last, in the pitiless open light of that hall, the truth about Rashid Al-Mazrui began to tell itself, and no one had to say a word, because Rashid could not do it. He had never in his life sat at a bench and made a thing. He picked up the torch and flinched from his own flame. He set a stone, and it sat crooked and fell out. His hands, which had never once been asked to be good at anything, shook. Across the platform, the designer from Istanbul worked with practiced speed, and Leah Mercado, small, still, entirely unhurried,
bent over her bench and disappeared into the work the way she did every morning at 8, and gold began to become a flower under her fingers. The cameras, hungry, cut between the three of them again and again, and even the 200,000 strangers watching at home could see it without being told. 2 artisans and one very rich young man drowning in front of the whole world at a craft he had only ever pretended to have. Rashid felt the room understanding it. And Rashid did what men like him always do when the objective truth begins to speak. He tried to shout over it. He stood up from his bench, abandoning the crooked ruin of his piece, grabbed the microphone meant for the closing ceremony, and pointed a shaking finger across the platform at Leah. "Before this goes any further," he announced, "everyone deserves to know that that woman is a thief. She was fired from this very mall 3 days ago for stealing a diamond. She has no business on this stage. I demand she be removed. This is my family's mall." His voice was climbing now, past control. "My family owns this building, this floor, this whole prize. You all exist to serve me. I will not be judged like some tradesman next to a criminal shop girl." And the hall, which he had expected to leap to obey, simply went silent and stared at him. Because the one table in the room that mattered did not belong to his family. Master Salim Al-Amiri rose slowly to his feet.
"Young man," he said, and his old voice, without any microphone at all, filled the glass hall. "You have made an accusation of theft in public against a finalist in my competition. That is a serious thing. In my hall, we do not settle serious things with the loudness of a man's voice or the size of his father's company." He turned, unhurried, to the front row. "Mr. Kumar, you were at the cameras that day. I am told you have something the mall's administration preferred to lose." Deepak Kumar stood up, walked to the technician at the edge of the stage, and handed over the memory card. And on the giant screens where Rashid Al-Mazrui had hoped to display his triumph, 4 angles of time-stamped security footage began instead to play. There was the Maison Lumen salon 3 days before. There was the old woman sitting 3 meters from the case, her hands in her lap. There was Nabil unlocking the case and setting the diamond on the pad. And there, in crisp, undeniable 4-camera high definition, slowed down and zoomed by the technician on Salim's nod, there was Rashid Al-Mazroui's own manicured hand closing over the diamond, slipping it into his jacket pocket and setting down the empty box a full 10 seconds before he spun around and pointed at a 70-year-old widow and screamed, "Thief." The hall made a single sound, a low collective intake of breath that was worse than any shout. On the screen, the timestamp ticked. In the front row, Halima put both hands over her mouth. And 200,000 people, and climbing, watched the landlord's son rob his own family's shop and frame a grieving old woman for it in high definition with the timestamp running. "It appears," Master Salim said quietly into the ringing silence, "that the only thief who has been on the stage today is the one who has been shouting the word." Rashid's face had gone the color of ash. That's doctored. You can't. Do you know who "I know exactly who your father is," Salim said. "Everyone does. That has never been your problem, boy." He let that land, and then he turned his back on Rashid entirely. The same insult, Leah realized, that she had given him on the very first morning, and addressed the judges. "We will finish the judging as it began, blind, by number." And this was the moment the whole story had been built toward, the moment that made it a story about merit and not about revenge. Because no one dragged Rashid Al-Mazrui out. No secret heir produced a hidden deed. No board seized his shares. Leah Mercado did not have a single thing up her sleeve except her hands. He was undone by 2 things only, and both of them were entirely his own. The truth of what he had done, shown plainly, and the truth of what he could not do,
sitting in a crooked, half-finished ruin on the bench behind him for all the world to see. Fire had found the cheap metal. It hadn't needed any help.
Rashid looked around the hall for someone to save him. He looked for his hangers-on and found them staring at the floor. One of them, a younger cousin named Fahd, who had laughed at every cruelty for months, was quietly, shamefully turning off the phone he'd been filming with, unable to look at the screen. Rashid looked last for his father and found Omar al-Mazrui, who had arrived to watch his son be crowned, already on his feet at the back of the hall, white with a fury that, for once in Rashid's life, was pointed at him. Because Omar had built the whole empire on one thing above all, the family name. And his son had just dragged that name through 4 cameras worth of mud in front of the entire world for a prize he was too lazy and too small to earn honestly. Rashid understood in that moment the thing that would follow him longer than any headline, that he had spent his whole life surrounded by people who served him, and not one of them was standing with him now, because he had never once, not for a single day, stood with anyone else. He fled. He simply put down the microphone and walked out through the grand north doors of the atrium, the same doors through which he'd had an old woman and an honest girl thrown. Alone, while 300 people watched him go and said nothing. Then the hall turned back to the benches and the work.
The judges scored the 3 finished pieces the way they had begun, blind, by number. Each master examining pieces marked only I, 2, and 3 under a loop, conferring in low voices, writing sealed scores. Rashid's abandoned ruin was not even scored. There was nothing there to score. And when Salim al-Amiri opened the envelopes and read out the results to the silent, breathless hall, the piece that had won, unanimously, with the highest score the Atrium Masters Prize had recorded in its history, was piece number 2, a single white Sampaguita flower in gold, 41 stones set so cleanly they seemed to float, its petals so fine they trembled in the draft of the air conditioning. "Would the maker of piece number 2, Salim said, and for the first time his old voice was not quite steady, come and be recognized?" And in a borrowed clean shirt, with gold dust on her hands and her father's punch in her pocket, the counter girl stood up. The grand hall of the atrium erupted. They were on their feet before Leah had taken 3 steps. The craftsmen and the shop staff and the guards and the baristas, all the gray and navy uniforms who kept the palace running and were never once asked, standing and clapping, and some of them weeping, because one of their own, with nothing but her hands, had just won the whole thing out loud, in the light, where it could never be taken back. The designer from Istanbul crossed the stage to shake her hand first, one true artisan to another. Deepak Kumar was clapping so hard his palms stung. And in the front row, an old woman in a black abaya, with a rebuilt ring on a chain over her heart, was saying to no one and to everyone, "That's her. That's my daughter. That's the one who was kind to me." Master Salim al-Amiri came around the judges' table, took Leah's careful, scarred, gold-dusted hands in his own careful, scarred hands, and turned them over and looked at them the way you look at something rare.
50 years I have judged this prize, he said, loud enough for the microphones, and I have spent every one of them trying to protect a single idea. He lifted her hands slightly, as if presenting them to the room. Today, that idea won. Not because someone rescued her, not because she turned out to be secretly rich or secretly important. She turned out to be exactly what she appeared to be, a shopgirl in a gray uniform. And that was enough, because the work was true. That is the only kind of victory worth anything. The Atrium Masters Prize came with 3 things, and Leah received all of them in front of the world.
a master's title recognized by the guild across 3 continents, the flagship commission the prize existed to award, to design and build the centerpiece jewel for the Atrium's own 10th anniversary collection, the single most prestigious commission in the city that season, and a sum of prize money that to a family in a small town in the Philippines would sound like a fairy tale. She would not be getting on any plane. She would be signing within the month as the youngest master artisan Maison Lumen had ever retained. No longer the counter girl, but the name on the workshop door. But Leah's first act, before she accepted any of it, was to walk to the front row and kneel down in front of Halima and take the aid woman's hands. "Auntie," she said, "you told me the day I gave you back Abdullah's ring that I wouldn't know until later how generous God is." She was crying now and not trying to hide it. "You came back 3 times. You came back to a place that was cruel to you, just because someone was kind to you once. And because you came back that last day, there was a witness in that salon he couldn't buy, and a camera pointed the right way, and..." She pressed her forehead to the old woman's hands. "You saved me by being exactly who you are. Both of us thrown out on the same pavement, and it turns out we saved each other."
The cruelties were mended, one by one, in the days that followed, though the live stream only ever captured that one bright morning. Halima received a formal, public apology from the Atrium, and, quietly, a standing invitation to Maison Lumen's salon as an honored guest for the rest of her life, where the staff, every one of them, learned her name. Deepak Kumar's 9 years of quiet, watchful honesty were finally seen. On Master Salim's personal recommendation, he was made head of the guild's security for the entire regional prize, a real position with a real wage, and the photographs in his locker got a better frame. Emil the Ghost was hired into Leah's own new workshop, where his fine, honest hands could at last work under his own name. Nabil kept his job, and, he would say later, his soul, having found the courage a few days late, but found it all the same. And Maison Lumen's lease, which the Mazrais had used as a whip for years, was quietly renewed by an Omar el-Mazrai suddenly very interested in appearing fair, because the world was watching now, and the family name he worshipped depended, at last, on behaving as though character were something they'd always valued. As for Rashid, no court and no board and no secret heir ever needed to touch him. He simply had to live, from that morning on, in the world the footage made. The young man who robbed his own family shop, framed a grieving widow, and could not set a single stone straight in front of the entire world. His designer brand evaporated overnight. The friends who had laughed at his jokes stopped returning his calls, and every time he walked into a room, he saw it in people's eyes, the thing that gold plating can never hide once the world has seen the metal underneath. His father's name had opened every door he'd ever walked through. It turned out to be the one thing that couldn't keep him standing in a room once he was in it.
That evening, after the cameras were gone, Leah Mercado stayed late in the grand hall, alone, sweeping the last of the gold dust from her bench into a little envelope the way her father had taught her. Waste nothing, Anak. Even the dust is honest. She took out his small steel punch, the 8-rayed sun, and held it in the light of the great dome. And she didn't say anything, because she didn't need to. Rashid al-Mazroui had a famous name, a father who owned half the skyline, and a suit that cost more than most people earn in a year. Leah Mercado had a borrowed clean shirt, a dead man's box of worn tools, and a pair of hands that could not lie. Only one of them walked out of that glass hall with anything worth keeping. So here's the question I want you to sit with, and tell me in the comments. Do you think the world Rashid grew up in, where his name opened every door, made him this way? Or do you think some people would be cruel with power no matter how they were raised? Be honest. And be honest about this too. We have all, at least once,
looked at someone in a gray uniform and decided, without word, that they were less. If you believe that what your hands can do should count for more than the name you were born with, that character is the one hallmark that can't be faked, then subscribe and stay for the next one. Because next time, it's a 5-star kitchen, a celebrity chef's arrogant son who humiliates the silent dishwasher at the back, never dreaming that the quiet man at the sink once wore 3 stars of his own, and is about to be asked to judge the very dinner that's meant to crown the boy. You will not believe how that one ends.